Do you have like writer's block with like cupcake T-shirts?
So myself and my team, we look at everything in cupcake vision. If somebody's puking on the side of Boylston Street, we'll be like, we should make a shirt with someone puking out cupcakes. And we have a lot of ideas. Anytime we have a block, though, we'll watch cartoons, we'll go grocery shopping, get inspiration from the packaging.
So, David Edwards, Cafe ArtScience, which is in Cambridge. Anybody been to Cafe ArtScience? Yeah. Anybody not been there but kind of really want to go there? Yeah, more hands going up. Well, this is the man behind it. He teaches at Harvard, and I got to read this exactly, because when I first saw this, I was like, this is the coolest thing to ever teach. He's a professor of the practice of idea translation. I was like, whatever that is, and I'm not sure what it is, that is cool. That was my thought. But, you know, at Cafe ArtScience, they work on everything from, and in his work in general, from like how you can inhale your flavors to how you can eat your packaging. So let's give him a big warm welcome to the stage, Mr. David Edwards.
Thank you. Hello. Oh, thank you so much. It's really amazing to be here. And well, I have 8 minutes, so I'll go really quickly. And you know, I'm really interested in the future of food. You might think, well, there's a really good future of food, but there's a real big issue that there's so many of us, so many more of us than the planet ever imagined having. You probably know the statistic that for every 15 people dead, there's one person alive today, which is pretty incredible. And so one of the issues is, how do we feed everybody? And having figured that out, how do we keep sustainable human health and the health of the environment? And so I'm pretty passionately interested in the latter question. What do we do differently about the way we eat so that we, our children, our grandchildren, are healthy and the environment is sustainable? And so 2 things I'll talk about. Yes, we have the Cafe ArtScience in Cambridge. Come over. It's a kind of a place where you can have a great meal, but we can also do some experimentation and sort of figure out how we chart this path forward to the future of food. So 2 innovations that I've been involved in. One relates to edible packaging. And so I was passionately interested by this idea that we might replace plastic packaged food by food forms that are modeled on how nature packages fruit. And so might you have coconut kind of bottles? Really the best bottle we have is a coconut. You cut it off the tree and send it around the world. You open it up and you've got great coconut water. Might we have any food form in the form of a grape, if you will? And so we invented something called Wiki Food, which now is part of a company called Incredible Food. And if Kevin here could take a bowl and start walking around, you're going to get maybe your first taste of a, well, this is a non-dairy ice cream lacking the 8 major food allergens. It's called Perfectly Free. And while it's being sold in boxes, it doesn't need to be. If you take this little ice cream ball and drop it in your water or beer or whatever it is, it'll float and it'll wash like a grape, and you can kind of wash it off. And if you leave that ice cream in your fingers for a long time, it will melt, but it'll stay in the skin. And if you put it in a microwave and you heat it up, it'll become a kind of a milkshake. So it really, but it is all perfectly natural. The skin is made of, well, it might be blueberries or salty caramel, and it has some molecules in it that come from mushrooms and algae. And so it really does behave like the skin on your body, and yet it's a real barrier to oxygen and water, and yet it tastes really, really good. And so it's now in 2,000 or 3,000 stores on the East Coast, and it's expanding across the United States. And we have other forms. We can make any fruit in the form of a grape. Kids are not eating fruit anymore because it's too complicated, and parents are worried about the skin. So we can now make any fruit in the form of a grape. And we can also make yogurt in the form of a grape, and so on and so forth. And so anyway, that's now a company called Perfectly Free. Really interesting. How do you transform eating? There's also retail experience and distribution experience, and so in any event, we've learned a lot through Perfectly Free. The other platform that I'm going to try and demonstrate, even though I'm holding my microphone, relates to digital scent. So one of the issues of having actually succeeded through plastics and other things to get food really plentifully to most of the world is that people are eating more than they should. And the reality is that we, of course, all evolved in circumstances of deprivation. So having an excess, we just like eat it all. And one of the challenges then is how do we hack the senses so that we actually get the pleasure we want and yet the nutrition that we need. And so scientists since 2004 and the Nobel Prize for understanding how olfaction works have become super interested in scent. Of course, we're all interested maybe in scent. It's kind of a secondary signal, but it's the only sensory nerve that goes right to the brain. And so you sort of are afraid, or you're hungry, or you're nostalgic, and you don't know why. You emotively process scent before you cognitively do. And so it's an interesting thing. It's used, it has all kinds of roles in satiety, and also it turns out that kids, when they smell fruit, they're more likely to eat fruit than they are chocolate. And so there's a lot of really interesting things. So we have digitized it. There's a kind of a scent speaker. It's called Cyrano. And you have an app, and I'm going to do this if anybody wants to see this later. And you can like send scent notes to your friends and all of that. And so it's pretty cool. But basically the idea is you have an app. It's like iTunes of scent. It's called O Notes, and it's free on the App Store. And so this thing pairs by Bluetooth with your Cyrano. Look at that, it's paired. And then it has a bunch of scent families. The one that's in there is called Central Park. And then you go and you then have these scent playlists. You play them and then they play these scent kind of playlists. And if you go to like the individual scents, I can do this for you later. And if I play like grass, then I've got the smell of grass. And then if I play the smell of like waffle cone, I have a smell of waffle cone. That's pretty cool. But what's really cool is when you go to like your Spotify, which I'm doing right now, I go to my music and anything, so like piano bar. So any song that I play, it starts to play, and then it chooses the scents that are emotively closest to that song, and it plays those scents. And so it like emotively amplifies the music. So it's super cool. So the ability of scent to, okay. That's in a sentimental mood. So anyway, if you're interested in having a scent experience and curbing your appetite, we can do this afterwards. I don't know if that's 8 minutes, but that's my story. So thank you very much.
David, don't go anywhere, David. I have some questions for you. This stuff is insane. So I assume at some point you were like a kid.
No, I never was actually. I just skipped that phase. But yeah, I did.
But you know, you were like a kid. You were growing up. You went to school. You were like, "What am I going to do with my life?"
Absolutely.
Where did the idea to start doing this kind of stuff come from?
Yeah, interesting. You know, I hated school. I was really not made for the normal world. So I kind of hung in there long enough until being me became sort of an in thing to be, and so ideas that I had that were always interesting to me, but not very interesting to others. Suddenly, it became interesting. So that's not a very fair thing to say. I did, you know, kind of got my traction in applied math, and so I wrote textbooks. I thought I'd be that's what I would do. I had like 5 people who knew what I was doing. And then that was really, that didn't really pan out. Like the world was not really interested for another applied mathematician writing textbooks. And so I kind of went from one thing to the next. And ultimately getting into food, I was into global health and inhaled vaccines and things. I had a not-for-profit in Africa. And, you know, it was middle 2000s, and Africa, there was a relative affluence coming, and suddenly they were eating things that we were sending from, like, the United States, and all this packaging was, like, piling up outside of cities, and people were getting all of our diseases. And it seemed to me that, you know, the problem that most mattered to the planet was maybe not infectious disease and vaccines, but was just food. So I've been kind of passionate for the last 10 years to help solve that problem.
Wow. Were you like into food prior to this, or did you just sort of back into it this way?
Yeah, I'm pretty hacked into it. I like anybody, I like food a lot. But there's something for a creator that's really fascinating about food is that people eat it. You know, and there's nothing more important to a creator than that somebody actually cares about what they created. Whether they like it or not, they care about it. And it's not like I wrote books, it took years, and then somebody reads it and maybe tells me about it, but when you make something that somebody's going to eat, they eat it, they spit it out, and you like know right away. So there's something about the dialogue with people that meant a lot to me.
How about, in this kind of stuff, some of the products that you're talking about, but also just in general in your work, is this idea of the idea and like coming up with these ideas and then making them happen. For you, do you have a process by which you go sort of to a place, whether that be here or somewhere physically, for ideas, or is it just they're there and you're capturing them all the time? Like, is it active or is it passive for you?
I think it's both. I think that people like me like to be often in environments where they're not so comfortable. And so putting yourself in situations where you're kind of sensitive and vulnerable is something that is often encouraging new ideas. Being around young people, actually, who don't really know what they want to be when they grow up helps a lot. Just having ideas and sharing ideas, actually one of the really important things about inventing is just share. Actually get everything out, because the more that goes out, the more that comes back, and you really don't have an idea until you express it. So I share a lot. Actually, the laboratoire, if anybody comes to the cafe, there's an exhibition space right next door where we exhibit lots of ideas. So finding a cultural forum where I could share ideas has been helpful. So that's all kind of really general, but kind of that's the recipe.
David Edwards, everybody. Let's hear it for him.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I've got another trivia question for a little bit later if you guys want it, but right now we've got another one of our speakers coming up, which I am very excited about. So the theme today is Guess Again, and this is one of these really cool things because there's a bunch of surprises in this for me. One, that this is something that's happening locally, and two, that it's happening at all. And that's the idea that whether you know it or not, what you are eating and drinking and consuming every day, the United States military has a huge hand in that in ways that I think maybe you or I don't expect. And we're going to welcome to the stage a speaker who has kind of blown the doors off of this, author who's written about this. The book is called Combat Ready Kitchen, How the U.S. Military Shapes the Way You Eat. Please welcome to the stage Anastacia Marx de Salcedo.
All right, let's see if I can get this going. How's that? All right. When I tell people the title of my book, which Edgar just read, generally the reaction is, wow, that is really fascinating. And then people get this puzzled look and they say, how did you get into that topic? Actually, it was through an ordinary sandwich. One day, about 5 years ago, I was packing lunches for my 2 younger daughters. And I might have been a little caffeine deprived that day and feeling grumpy, and I was thinking about how crappy all the things I was putting into their lunch boxes were, which were a lot of individually wrapped, single portion items. And then I made the sandwich, which I kind of considered to be, the nutritious part of the lunch. And all of a sudden, I realized that my sandwich is probably no healthier nor fresher than the items in packages alongside it. And that, in fact, each of the components, the bread, the deli meat, the cheese, and the mayo, had all come from packages that had been in my refrigerator or in my bread box, and before that they'd been in a supermarket, and before that in a manufacturing facility somewhere. So I think behind me, did I mention I'm a food writer? I think that was spoken about. I'm a food writer, and at that time I had just made a serious detour into industrial food, and I wasn't only interested in the history, but in the science and technology behind it. So after I got the little deers out the door, I set to work doing research on why all the ingredients in my sandwich were so strangely long-lived. And what I found was this really unnerving coincidence. For two of the items, the supermarket bread and the deli meat, at their origins was research done by what was, to me, an obscure, and I need to add here, I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, U.S. Army base, the Natick Soldier Systems Center. Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Okay, good. All right. So I said to myself, whoa, what is the Army doing in our food? The Natick Soldier Systems Center is one of about 80 Defense Department laboratories around the country. They have about 10 or so programs, all to do with supporting the individual soldier in the field. So that means things like footwear, textiles, body armor, tents, airdrop equipment, and combat rations. So one of their programs, the Combat Feeding Directorate, is right there, and they have their own separate building towards the rear of the facility. It's really cute. It's got blue and teal stripes, and there about 300 mostly civilian employees work all year round on developing and perfecting combat rations, which by congressional mandate must be able to last for 3 years at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So there are two main lines of individual combat ration, the MRE, which most people have heard of, and the first strike ration, which most people haven't heard of. It's a new ration consisting mostly of snack items for quote-unquote grazing. That's actually what the Army says. The Combat Feeding Directorate has another mission, which is not so well known, and that is to get its food science into consumer items, which is why it's had a hand in many of the major processing breakthroughs of the 20th and 21st centuries. Everything from freeze-dried coffee to TV dinners to giant soft and chewy cookies. The reason why sounds sort of like a conspiracy theory, but it isn't, and that is preparedness. Raise your hand if you've heard of preparedness. Okay, good. All right, so this actually dates back to World War II, and at that time, the U.S. had to ramp up from feeding 400,000 to 11.6 million soldiers. To do that, they basically invented the field of modern food science, which they carried out in their labs, and with hundreds, I mean hundreds, of university and industry collaborators. That's after the war, for deterrence reasons, and just in case World War III ever happened, Eisenhower decided to leave that system in place and in a state of perpetual readiness. Ergo, the Natick Center. Okay, so now let's go back to the lunches that I was packing for my daughters, and I so conveniently happened to have a lunchbox with me with some food inside. So I'm going to unpack it and for some of the military influences. Okay, here we have Exhibit A, the sandwich. I don't even have to unwrap this for the first military influence. This plastic film was developed in a massive classified research program during World War II. The goal was to find replacements for some of the materials used in everyday objects, which was now needed for military purposes. So we're talking about things like shower curtains, raincoats, shoe soles, shoelace tips, the handles for utensils, and of course, food packaging. The food packaging of the day was cellophane, which is a really leaky plant-based polymer. So what the program did was it developed this new water-resistant polymer based on synthetic plastics with a partner, Dow Chemical. And if anybody's heard of Dow Chemical, raise your hand, haha. And so this was such an exciting development for Dow that the minute the end of the war became imminent, and that was the day that Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, it literally ran to the patent office and took out a patent on what became known as saran wrap. Okay, let me get in here. I'll dip it. All right. So now here we have our sandwich. Has anybody ever noticed that supermarket bread never seems to go stale? What is up with that? Well, what's up with that is that it's actually a shelf life preservation technique that was developed in a 1950s armed services project to create a canned bread. To work on staling, they had a contractor experiment by adding bacterial enzymes to the dough. Now, just a word on enzymes. Enzymes are proteins that speed up particular chemical reactions, and they're pretty much identical across the tree of life. So in bread, an important enzyme is amylase, which breaks down the starch into sugars that the yeast then consumes. Traditional bread has two sources of amylase. One is from the yeast, which is a plant, and the other is from the yeast, which is a fungus, and the other is the wheat, which is a plant. Both of these like a relatively cool temperature range, however. So when their enzymes are baked, they're inactivated. The innovation here was to take this same amylase enzyme from a heat-resistant bacteria and add it to the bread. And that allowed the enzyme survived cooking and continued to break down the starches for weeks afterwards. Nowadays, all supermarket bread is conditioned using this enzyme. It took several decades to work the kinks out of the technology, but it's pretty dominant at this point. All right, last item here. All right, here we have a lovely slice of packaged deli meat. This is actually a restructured meat product, which was a 1960s Army project to reduce the cost of its meat bill by 60%. At that time, the meat industry was switching from shipping out meat in carcasses to meat in boxes, and that allowed the Army executives to buy only the cheapest parts and then try and figure out a way to make them look and taste like steaks, ribs, and chops. So that project, again, took almost a decade and a half, and it included some spectacular breakthroughs, such as the invention of meat glue by collaborator Oscar Mayer. But yes, by the mid-1970s, the Army was indeed fielding what it originally called fabricated meat and what is now called restructured meat. Contractors on that project immediately went to the fast food industry with this profitable technology, and they bought in, and sure enough, soon all sorts of fast food delicacies appeared, such as the McRib, and from there it was just a short hop, skip, and a jump to the supermarket. Today we actually eat 60 more pounds of animal protein per person than Americans did in the 1950s. And this is due in large part to the fact that it is cheaper, thanks to the Army. All right, my lunchbox is actually full of all sorts of other treats, and you're welcome to ask me about them during Q&A or when I'm walking around. Before I close, I just wanted to add a last and somewhat frightening thought. Do you remember how I mentioned that the Natick Center is one of 80 Defense Department laboratories nationwide, and the Combat Feeding Directorate is one of a dozen programs there? This process is actually going on in pretty much every economic sector. We all know the technology examples, but there are all countless other examples in things like medicine, automotive, construction, video gaming, chemistry, textiles, and on and on and on. We really don't notice it because we live in it, but American consumer society of the 21st century is completely militarized. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for ending on a terrifying thought. We try to end most of our talks on a terrifying thought. No, but there's good in it too, right? I mean, it's not all bad, correct? Yeah, we're going to chat for a little bit. It's not all bad, right? I mean, there's...
Absolutely not. And
yeah.
In fact, one of the good things is that the Army, because rations need to last for a long time and be safe for soldiers, it really is the expert in what is known as shelf stability and food preservation. And many of that technology, of course, has flowed out to the industry. So we can thank them for being able to eat safe food.
You've obviously been to the facility. I don't know, can you tell, like, what does it look like in there? Are you even allowed to talk about it? Or when you go in, do you have to, like, be like, I won't tell anybody what's happening in here?
The facility, as I mentioned, it is, this funny little blue and teal striped building. And inside, it's an ape-shaped building. Inside, they have a lot of different laboratories. They have what they call a pilot lab where they develop formulations for the different rations and with all sorts of basically big cooking equipment. They have a special lab that they call the Polymer Center of Excellence where they develop all sorts of packaging. And if you ask me about some of these items, I'll talk about some of the things that have come out of that. There is a place where they test the rations, and this is actually a lot of fun. They take them in boxes and then they drop them from, a height that's sort of similar to that of a low helicopter drop. They jiggle it like it were on a truck. They put it in different chambers to see how long, well, it survives at 100 degrees Fahrenheit in dry heat and wet heat and other things. And then they have a sensory evaluation laboratory, and they do a tremendous amount of testing. And I think actually that civilians can volunteer if anybody's interested. And so you test the rations after, and I actually, while I was there, I sampled, I think it was an 8-month hamburger.
And you're still with us. You live to tell the tale.
I have to tell you that I collect rations now, and I age them sort of like a fine wine in my basement. I have one that I'm planning to try a couple years after its packaging date, just to see, how that goes.
Anastacia Marx de Salcedo. Let's hear it for her. Flag her. She's got more stuff in this lunchbox, and she wants to tell you about it. So there you go. Or are you going to take it with you? Is that, yeah, there it is. Okay, who wears T-shirts? Sometimes. You wear T-shirts? Yeah. Most T-shirts, like, whatever. But our next speaker has sort of turned a joke about T-shirts into a fine art that has changed the path of his life. So Johnny Cupcakes has become such a thing that there are more than 2,000 people in the world who have Johnny Cupcakes tattoos. Johnny Cupcakes has had limited edition T-shirts go on sale, and people have slept outside of his place on Newberry Street for 2 weeks to get their hands on these T-shirts. That's how big a deal these things are. And the beautiful thing is that the T-shirt shop looks nothing like a T-shirt shop. It looks like a bakery. If all that sounds insane, it's going to be explained right now. Please welcome to the stage the fabulous, the famous Johnny Cupcakes.
Hello. My name is Johnny Cupcakes. Cupcakes is not my real last name, but I usually pretend it is, and I tell people that it's Portuguese and it's Johnny Cupcakes. So you can call me Johnny Cupcakes. I grew up south of Boston in Hull, Massachusetts. I like Home Alone 1 and 2, yeah. And Kevin and I actually grew up together. I remember he was a grade above me, and I'd see him at all the school dances, and it was a good time. But I grew up in Hull, and I always wanted to figure out a way to spend more time with the people that I love. I would see my mom and my dad spend so much time commuting to work that they did not get to raise us as much as I wish they could have. So my little sister and I were raised by this crazy yet loving Greek family next door, so we know all the bad words in the Greek language, like malaka, and it was great, but it inspired me to be an entrepreneur, and I started 16 businesses before I was 16 years old, determined to figure out a way to spend more time with my family. I started with lemonade stands. I would have yard sales when my family was not home, and I just kept trying new things. I was a magician at one point. I'd do magic at birthday parties, and I sold glow sticks, Tupperware. I was at a grocery store, and this cute old lady was like, "How would you like to win a free minivan?" And I was like, "I'd love one." And she said, "You just got to sell Tupperware." So I tried it, and it was a little different, and I stopped, but I still have all my Tupperware. I just don't know where the lids are. And I had a difficult time learning. I was put into a charter school. It was probably the best thing that happened to me. I got to learn in small classrooms and learn at my own pace. And I was encouraged to do these little experiments with my entrepreneurialism, and I started the school's first yearbook. I pre-sold it in 8th grade and sold 100 yearbooks before they even existed. So when I went to go pay for them at Kinko's, I was using other people's money. I was able to make a very calculated risk, and that helped out. And anytime I'd sell something, I'd just take that money and try these other experiments. At one point, I sold pranks. I would go to this one joke shop at the Harborlight Mall, rest in peace, and I would buy so many pranks that this owner of this joke shop gave me a catalog where I could order them at wholesale prices. And I started reselling whoopee cushions at school, and I went home that day with the Bible of entrepreneurship. It was the Oriental Trading Company catalog, and oh my God, I couldn't believe this thing. You could get like a billion pieces of candy for like $60. If you sell them for $1 each, that's $1 billion. And I started doing all this monkey math in my head. And I was like, all right, I think I can do this. And I just kept figuring out ways to try to work for myself. I tried out going to college. It didn't work out for me. I took a small break. I'm still on that break. My parents were very supportive, which was great. They said, "School's not going anywhere. We want you to take your time, find your passion." And it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I never felt like I had to rebel with my parents, even though I grew up with drug dealers and troublemakers. I've never tried any drugs. I've never even been drunk before. I've just always been that creepy guy at parties who did magic tricks, and that's just what I did. So I was working at Newbury Comics when I was 18, 19 years old in Braintree, Massachusetts. And I had a tremendous amount of nicknames. Since my name's Johnny, my goofy coworkers would call me Johnny Appleseed. If I was late for work, they'd call me Johnny Come Lately. Johnny Cupcakes came out of nowhere, and I thought it would be funny to put on a T-shirt to advertise for a bakery that didn't even exist. The inner jokester inside of me thought this would be a funny social experiment. And I was getting T-shirts made for the hardcore metal band that I was in, and I decided to make one of these shirts. I wore it to work, and all these slightly miserable customers that never made eye contact with me, they started laughing and saying, "What's Johnny Cupcakes? Is that a bakery? Is that an adult movie store?" And I'm like, no, it's just a T-shirt that I made. And it caused so much curiosity that strangers were walking up to me while I was, organizing records and comic books, and they'd say, "Psst, you that cupcake guy? Where can I get one of those T-shirts?" I'm like, "What do you need? I'll meet you in the back parking lot at 8 o'clock. And it was very sketchy. It looked like a drug deal, but I was selling these cupcake T-shirts out of my beat-up '89 Camry, and anytime I'd sell 12 T-shirts, I'd take that money and reinvest it back into 24 T-shirts. And all the money and time that I was saving by not partying with my friends, I had extra time and energy on the weekends to put into these ideas. And even though I failed at many of them, and I still fail every single day, but I think the best part about being an entrepreneur is you learn how to adapt, and you just have to roll with the punches every single day, and it can transcend into other parts of your life and dealing with different situations. So I was making these shirts, and it kept growing, I started traveling with the hardcore metal band that I was in, selling shirts out of my suitcase. At one point, I left the band. I took a big risk, and I was like, all right, I have to put 100% into these T-shirts. So got my online shop up. Random people were buying shirts from different parts of the world. And anytime we shipped out a T-shirt, it was my #1 goal to make sure that people felt like it was their birthday anytime they purchased a T-shirt. It wasn't a marketing idea. It was just, I just want to thank anybody that buys these T-shirts, because I don't have to work at Building 19 in the greeting card section anymore. I can, I can make these cupcake T-shirts, and I think we can make it work. So this kept growing. It kept growing, and before I knew it, I opened my first store in Hull, Massachusetts. I was using my parents' attic to sell T-shirts, and at one point I had customers returning T-shirts that had cat hair on them and cigarette smoke, and I was like, all right, I need my own space. So opened up this spot. It was $700 a month for rent. And it was great. It was an old boat garage. My dad and I converted into a store, into a shipping facility, an office. And since it was zoned commercially, we were able to have events there, just like you guys are having an event right now. And this helped us get a little bit of extra income, excitement, and to support other people in the community in Hull. So time went by, and I realized that I have a store in Hull, and not many people walk by and buy a gas station in a playground, and in the winter, it's not so happening. So I took a risk that changed my life, and I put all of my chips on the table, and I decided to open up a store on Newbury Street in Boston, Massachusetts. This was 10 years ago, and it was scary, and I'll never forget it. My mom was was very nervous, but I sat on the steps of this spot that was for rent, right off of Gloucester Street and Newbury Street, and I watched all the people walking by, and I said, all right, if I can trick half of these people into thinking we sell real food, and half of them leave with a T-shirt, but 100% of them leave with a story to share and an experience, whether they're mad there's no food or happy there's T-shirts, they're leaving with something to talk about. And if I can put my advertising budget into building a unique experience through a retail environment, I think I can make this work. So took the risk, opened up the shop. I was going from spending $700 a month on rent in Hull to spending $7,000, $8,000 a month on rent on Newbury Street. And I had no business education and no investors. I just had a feeling, and I did have an online shop, so I knew we shipped some shirts around New England. But the best thing about Massachusetts is you've got around 1 million students that move in and around this state every single year. So even if your idea never changes for some reason, the people are constantly changing, and they're taking your ideas and bringing them home. And I think it's a really great city that packs a punch. So we've opened up that shop, set it up like a bakery. I spent all the money I had and didn't have, and bought industrial refrigerators to display the cupcake-themed T-shirts inside of them. When you buy a T-shirt, we package them in pastry boxes, so you have this little experience. And I even hide vanilla-scented car fresheners, so when you walk into my retail store, you smell frosting. My friend Boris thought, he was like, how did you do that? I said, oh, it's easy. I mixed vanilla frosting with white paint. And he's like, really? I said, yeah, if you lick the wall right here, you'll be able to tell. So he went over there, he licked the wall, and he's like, I don't really taste it. I'm like, I'm sorry, man, it's on this part of the wall. And he went over there, he licked that. So I love playing tricks on people, and I think I think I get a lot of that from my dad, and he's always been a goofball. Anytime I'd have sleepovers as a kid, my dad would transform into Cat Dad, and he would, he'd stuff our cats in his shirt and make, he'd make sure that he didn't have a head anymore, and it was 1 or 2 cat heads. So I always wondered why my dad had all these little holes in his shirts for my cats trying to escape, but my parents are great. They're very loving, very open-minded, and it never made me feel like I had to rebel. So I've had the shop for 10 years now, and I've had the business for 15 years. We've opened up more than 400 pop-up shops around the world, from Japan to Australia. Pop-up shops have been great. You can test out, you can experiment with retail without signing away a big deal and potentially screwing things up. You can have all these tests around the States, and it's great. A lot of landlords encourage this now because their spaces seem attractive. So we love doing that. Now, what makes the brand a little bit different is we tried to have an experience around anything we release, from the packaging to the retail environment to the shirts themselves. We released a breakfast-themed T-shirt. You know that feeling you get when you go buy a breakfast sandwich and they won't sell it to you because it's 12:02, and you're like, those son of a guns, I thought it would be cool to share the same experience with our customers, so we made breakfast-themed T-shirts that you can only buy during breakfast hours. If you showed up in the afternoon, we wouldn't sell it to you, even if you drove from New York City to Boston. It's just against the rules. We can't do it. We've sold Halloween-themed T-shirts out of VHS tapes with fake movie titles on them. I've set my shop up like a haunted house. I've had my employees dress up like zombies. We've had costume contests for our customers. And I've gone as far as renting out a hearse and a coffin from a creepy guy on Craigslist to enhance the experience. And I would personally get delivered in this, with this coffin. And we'd release the T-shirts at nighttime to go along with the spookiness. And all of this stuff makes work fun for me, for my family, for my friends, and for our customers. And we try to do that with every release that we have. And sometimes we'll do collaborations, whether it's with Sanrio or Nickelodeon or the Ninja Turtles. We try to remix the brand. We release new T-shirts every single Friday at noon, and once we sell out of a design, we normally don't make it again. A lot of people will collect them. There's a girl in Belgium named Anne Mays, and she owns more than 700 Johnny Cupcakes T-shirts. She has 9 Johnny Cupcakes tattoos, and she just travels the world with her husband, and this is a thing that she likes to collect. And I've met a lot of people who've fell in love through the brand or met their best friends or significant others. And the best part about it for me is I was able, after that Newbury Street shop opened, I was able to hire my mom, my dad, my sister, and all I ever wanted my whole life was to just spend more time with the people that I love, and I was able to do that, and that's my story.
Johnny Cupcakes, everybody. Excellent.
I couldn't bring shirts for everybody, but raise your hand if you did not get a pink book or a little badge. Raise your hand if you did not get one of those. Up high, and we'll come around for you. Keep it raised up until your hand goes numb, and we've got a few little gifts for you. The toe
what?
shoes. You're mixing me up with Bill Nye.
Bill Nye. Bill Nye made the toe shoes. Yeah.
But
that's okay. But I'm sure if Johnny made like cupcake toe shoes, they'd be great.
We are talking with a few Boston sneaker companies right now about working on some shoes, so we'll see what happens.
Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, have you ever done something and you've gone, oh dear, I've taken the joke too far?
This has happened a lot. I trick hungry people for a living. We have terrible reviews on all those food websites, and it wasn't until I got married last year until I realized that you don't mess with a hungry person. It's just not a cool thing. But it took me a while. We did partner up with Union Square Donuts for a bit, so we have like a secret stash of donuts that we get if someone's really throwing a temper tantrum. But on April Fool's Day, we decided to replace our T-shirts with real cupcakes. We had customers drive from Maine to come buy shirts, and they just found cupcakes, and we were like, why would we sell T-shirts? So I might open a store. I might open a store across the street called Johnny's T-shirts that only sells cupcakes.
Perfect.
Just to mess with people. But I think, all right, the joke that went the furthest that I feel terrible about.
Yeah.
I have a customer who is who's a stunt coordinator. He's done a lot of stunts for a lot of big movies, and he's got an eye patch too. He looks pretty badass. I never asked him about his eye, but I found the story, and it's a long, scary story. But anyways, I got this new camera, and I was trying to do more YouTube videos, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna stage a fight in my Los Angeles pop-up shop of some hungry, upset customers walking in, and we just, in one day, planned the whole thing. I went out to Hollywood, and I bought all these glass bottles that are made out of candy that don't really cut you, but they do cut you if you do it the wrong way. But basically, we staged the fight. It looked incredible. We did it all in one take. If you do a search on YouTube for Johnny Cupcakes huge fight, you will find it. I never told my mom that this was fake before I did it. And I woke up to a lot of calls from like friends and family, and yeah, I felt terrible. So I regret doing that, and I never want to hurt my mom, but it was a pretty cool video.
But it was really funny, so yeah. Do you have a, I mean, it's interesting that you sort of do limited edition runs and stuff. Do you have like moments where you're like, feel like you're in the zone and you're designing like killer t-shirts? Do you have like writer's block with like cupcake t-shirts?
So myself and my team, we look at everything in cupcake vision. If somebody's puking on the side of Boylston Street, we'll be like, we should make a shirt with someone puking out cupcakes. And we have a lot of ideas. Anytime we have a block, though, we'll watch cartoons, we'll go grocery shopping, get inspiration from the packaging. One example is we released ice cream themed t-shirts that we packaged in oversized push-up pops, and you pop the handle off, and you pull out a rolled up t-shirt, and we sold these out of ice cream trucks that we rented in San Francisco, New York, Santa Monica, and we rebranded the whole ice cream truck. We dressed up like milkmen from the 1950s, and my favorite part about this is we didn't tell anyone where we were going to be because we wanted our customers to chase us like little kids chasing an ice cream truck. That's how authentic, we wanted the experience to be. So yeah, we get inspiration from everywhere, and yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Johnny Cupcakes, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Johnny, I'm going to ask you to hang up there, and I'm going to bring Anastacia up. Anastacia, where are you? Where are you? Come on back up here. We're just about out of time, but I want to give you guys a chance to talk to these guys. We've lost our first speaker. He's a very busy man. He's working on opening restaurants, potentially other cafe art sciences, and he had to bolt. But we have our other two speakers here, and I'm going to jump out into the crowd and say, now is the time. If you guys have questions for either of our lovely guests, raise your hand. I'll try to come out. There we go. There's a question. Go ahead. What's your name?
Crystal.
Crystal, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. What's your question, Crystal?
I'm just wondering now if you're going to trace the military backgrounds of his cupcakes.
Great question.
You never know. The only time sometimes our windows say no sugar, no carbs, no fat, and it's true that it's all fiber, it's all cotton. The only time I feel bad is when a really cute couple come in that have dietary restrictions. So maybe we can keep some like cupcakes that last forever in a glass case to break if someone's really upset.
How about just in a typical cupcake that you might buy at the grocery store? What did the military have to do with that? Do you know off the top of your head? Icing, cake stuff, what do you got?
Well, it probably does because the military was involved in something called intermediate moisture foods, and these actually populate the bakery aisle. So anything that is moist, the way that they make it shelf stable and avoid having any sort of microbiological contamination is they put a lot of sugar in it, which reduces something called water content. I'm not going to go into that. That's all science. But suffice to say that the military was behind this huge innovation, and it really made the bakery aisle profitable, and it was actually the thing behind making energy bars, soft and chewy energy bars, so that we all consume in such quantities possible. So yes, it was probably there.
Good question. You got a serious answer. Questions over here. What's your name?
Yeah, Karen.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Johnny, what's your favorite T-shirt that you've designed?
I would say it's this shirt. It causes the most curiosity. Everywhere I go, someone's like, what is that? Does that mean no sugar, or is that dog food? I've heard is it a biker bar? I've heard a lot of random things, but yeah, it turns the most heads and gets people talking, so yeah.
Questions. Throw a hand up. Anybody? Why, Karen, you have a question.
One for Anastacia.
There we go, Anastacia.
Anastacia, can you just spend 20 seconds on the other foods in your bag?
Thank you, Johnny.
There are a lot of other foods in my, thank you, assistant. A lot of other foods in my bag, and my lovely assistant will display them. I will give you a one-word description. This is freeze dehydration, otherwise known as freeze drying. And this was actually invented by the military, or actually it was put to use by the military after they used it to preserve blood products for World War II, and they decided to try it out for food preservation. So anything that is freeze-dried, military. This little container is a retort pouch. A retort pouch is a foil and plastic laminate that was invented during the 1960s to replace the tin can. It took a while to get into the American consumer market, but now it is. And your kids are drinking out of it. Oh, this is my favorite because this.
Uh-oh, trauma for our friend. Yeah, we have trauma for our friend. Those. Okay, these are just crackers. They're just crackers.
Okay.
It's okay.
Here we have the famous cheese powder. You may have heard of this. It is one of our favorite ingredients in industrial food, and this was actually invented during World War II when the military was trying to reduce the weight and volume of food being shipped overseas. It tried dehydrating cheese. That turns into a powder when you dehydrate it, ship that overseas. After the war, there was a cheese dehydration industry that needed to be fed, and it found customers, starting with Cheetos and spread all throughout the American snack and convenience food aisle.
Great. Anybody got a question to ask? We got time for one more question from anybody. Here it is. There it is. The brave soul. What's your name, sir? Robert, ask away. Final question. Make it a good one.
Now, who was the inventor of pink slime?
Wait, sir,
Is that a military
Pink slime?
slime? It extracts extra protein from beef.
I actually can't answer that question, so I don't know. I'm sorry.
They'll kill her if she does.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We know you know, but we're not going to make you tell us. And yes, and Google it. So we're left on a quizzical note, but I think that's a good thing. That leaves us all wanting more. So one more big round of applause for our speakers. Let's hear it for Anastacia, for Johnny Cupcakes, and for David, who unfortunately had to get out of here.